I'm Christina Hawthorne.
I just signed on as director of nursing.
Did you do your list of colleges?
Oh, we have time.
You up for going out tonight?
That woman died today, unnecessarily.
That's not your problem.
Yes, it is.
Mind if I sit in here with you for a while?
We're adding new titles every day to our awesome collection of blockbuster movies. Download the app and subscribe. This isn't just a streaming channel. This is a bold new world of entertainment. Arise Play. Beyond streaming.
A very warm welcome to this week, 60 minutes of analytical review of the big stories, topical issues and all the controversies around the world. I'm Sumner Sambo, and we go to the headlines. Former President of the Senate, Iyorchia Ayu, emerges Northern Consensus candidate for the post of National Chairman of the opposition People's Democratic Party. We've assembled a team of Arise News experts to help us dissect the implication for zoning and power rotation ahead of 2023. Senate approves direct primaries for political parties and finally bows to public pressure on electronic voting and transmission of election results. We have analysis. Nigerian military says ISWAP leader Abu Musab Al-Barnawi is dead, but provides no further details on whether he was killed by troops or factional terrorist group. And get vaccine or get sacked. That is the message by the Nigerian government to all federal civil servants, which will take effect from December 1, 2021. Stay with us. Welcome back. Ahead of the October 31st National Elective Convention of the People's Democratic Party, leaders and stakeholders of the party from the North have unanimously adopted former Senate President Dr. Iyorchia Ayu for the position of National Chairman. Ayu emerged the preferred choice of party leaders following strong opposition to the candidature of former Senate President David Mark by some party bigwigs. Ayu emerged after an intense lobby and reconciliation across board, which led to withdrawal from the race of two other contestants, Ibrahim Shema from the Northwest and Senator Abdul Nengi from the Northeast. But the choice of Iyorchia Ayu did not come on a platter of gold. Former national chairman of the party, who's also from the North Central, Abubakar Kawu Baraje, says the choice comes with a precondition that the North Central zone and other zones can still contest for the presidential ticket of the PDP. This decision by the main opposition party in Nigeria has raised questions of how the party intends to handle its zoning policy and also raises national questions on power rotation ahead of the 2023 elections.
Iyorchia Ayu has emerged as the consensus candidate of the North. And with this, we are fully prepared, we are ready. We will be talking to our colleagues in other parts of the country, particularly the South, that they see reason for this consensus candidate and give us support during the 30th and 31st convention of PDP. All of them were eminently qualified, but through discussion, through reconciliation, we have emerged with a consensus list that was endorsed by the candidate themselves.
It's my singular honor to accept the responsibility which has been put on my shoulders from the North. I believe at the end of the day, it will not only be the North, but it will be all Nigerians. The PDP will be back to its winning ways. We'll work tirelessly after the convention to rebuild the party, to take over power, to rebuild the country.
Well, to help us understand these critical issues, we've assembled a team of Arise News analysts, beginning with Mahmoud Jega, who joins me in the studio here. And also in the studio is Professor Abiodun Adeni, and joining us virtually is Professor Sam Amadi. Gentlemen, good to have you on the show.
My pleasure, thank you.
Yes. And I want to start with you, Mahmoud Jega. Let's talk about what this means for the North, Yochia Ayu's emergence, how the PDP was able to reconcile all of these varying interests, and then able to get some people to step down, and why this position is coming back to the middle belt, which has held these positions more than 5 times in the past.
That is true. Well, you know, politicians have their own calculations. Ayu is an eminently qualified person. As a journalist, I had been reporting on his politics for 30 years now, since 1992 when he was elected the president of the Senate, although it was one kind Senate when Babangida was still the military head of state. I was right there in the Sheraton when he was removed. And when he was Minister of Education in the Abacha regime, I interviewed him several times. And then he was Minister of up to 3 ministries in the Obasanjo regime. So he's a very experienced technocrat. And before that, he was also a brilliant left-wing academic. But he was previously not very involved in party administration. He was mostly a government figure. But of course, he is an experienced academic and politician, so I'm sure he will do the best. Now, as to how the PDP arrived at the consensus, one can only conjecture, given what Abubakar Ubaraje said, that, okay, we have taken the chairmanship that you have given us of the party, but that does not mean we cannot contest for the presidential ticket of the party. But we know that usually the way parties do things, especially PDP, any zone that takes the chairmanship, it means it has conceded the presidential ticket to the other part of the country. Usually that is how it works. But PDP didn't say that exactly, that, okay, the South will take the presidential ticket. I think they are keeping their options open. In particular, they will want to see what APC does. Maybe by next year. If APC zones its presidential ticket to the South, then it becomes very easy for PDP to say, okay, we have also zoned to the South. If not, maybe if APC leaves its ticket open, then possibly they may also have to reconsider. And within the 3 northern zones too, that the North Central took the chairmanship might mean that, okay, for example, if the South takes the presidential ticket, the Northwest or the Northeast might take the vice presidential ticket. You know, that's the way politicians do all these calculations. But we'll have to see. It is still early days now.
That's right. Very interesting. I will come to you, Prof. This is a very trying moment for Nigeria's democracy, considering that we have a president that's leaving power. So both political parties are just watching each other. With Yochia Ayu's emergence as a consensus candidate of the North, it means that there's a lot of horse trading ongoing so that no one comes out to challenge him, and eventually he will be adopted at the National Convention at the end of the month. Let's take a critical look at how his emergence as national chairman will change the power dynamics within that major opposition party.
Well, like Mahmoud said, UHIU is a first-class intellectual with background in the academia. You know,
I mean, he was your colleague as former
he was the
chairman of
University of
Unijos.
Jos. Yeah, that's right.
Of course, I was also with him in the Senate, those days as president of the Senate. But first, aside from his brilliance, we also have to appreciate that he's a very principled person, sometimes, very principled to a fault. And sometimes he often fails to be a consensus builder, because in politics you also need somebody who will foster understanding, foster peace, who will be able to orchestrate, A Yotia, for me, passes more like a technocrat, So but I want to believe that he has matured largely, and he might be able to bring this maturity to bear in the way he will thrive in party administration, because party administration is a different ball game, completely from Senate presidency, from administering the ministry and all of that. So we'll see how it goes, because what PDP requires now, is an elevated kind of administration to be able to pose a challenge, for the ruling APC that ordinarily will have advantage, come 2023. But having said that, I think the question of zoning should also be something that we should not be overemphasized. Yes, we are concerned about balancing because we believe that NAPs have been frayed in some circles. We have had zoning. Zoning, first of all, has been said it's not a constitutional thing. We agree. Secondly, we also have to make the point that it's often a product of gentleman's agreement. Yeah, we appreciate that as well. But from 1999, we've always had zoning, but it's not something that has been cast in stone. When the understanding was that power should shift to the south, in 1999, the southwest was favored, but we still have northerners contesting. Obakaremi contested, and of course in 2023, the same thing happened, 2027, 2007, 2011. So every time there's this understanding around zoning, you also have other sections contesting. I see that playing out in 2023, and that's why it's not an issue we probably should belabor. We need to also be mindful of the other thing that should count, in electioneering, which is the capacity, the ability of contestants to deliver the necessary goods. Because we haven't been able to move beyond the level we are because we pay too much attention to zoning, to intangibles in political calculations.
Yeah, very interesting intangibles indeed. And we'll bring you in, Professor Sam. You have understood PDP and its internal dynamics over the years. With the North Central taking over that position again, as it has been zoned, in the PDP, and eventually the North has backed it. What do you think the North Central is bringing within the dynamics of the geopolitics of PDP ahead of 2023?
Well, I think first, PDP has been struggling to balance two things: ethics, who gets what, and functionality, how to win election. And the leaders of the PDP are focused on winning back power. So it looks like equity may take the back seats. And that's why the party is saying this is open. Based on its internal arrangement, having had chairman for the south, so the party zoned the chairman to the north. Now, within the northern context, they read politics, and that's what triumphed on this process, is that no governor wants to have chairman in his zone. So Ibrahim Shema, very good candidate, experienced, former national vice chairman, not as somebody who has been man and who has been in the helping to organize the party strategy, was a choice from another zone. It didn't quite work well because the zone does not want the chairmanship. So the PDP structure has been that the governors don't want to have the chairman in their zone. So only North Central, really, maybe wants it for other ethnic strategic purposes. And Governor Otom played a key role here. So all we have seen is the traditional politics of PDP Governors Forum being the decider, being the ultimate stakeholder in deciding the direction of PDP politics. And here again, they play it very well. The governors of Northeast and Northwest who fancy themselves most as likely to pick the ticket from a certain perspective don't want the chairman in their zone. And so they didn't want, and then Otom was prepared to have the chairman. But of course, the perspective is that this will not preclude on paper anyone from running. But basically, de facto, he loads the odds or the dice against a North Central presidential candidate. And so what the PDP is, they did to win back power. And
if that proviso wasn't put in place because of Abubakar Bukola Saraki, the former president of the Senate, because we are hearing Baraje talking, but it looks like he's the the voice of someone else here.
Yes, the point is that everybody in that, all the big guys fancy themselves, including the governor of Bauchi, all of them have put themselves out and are doing background work. So Saraki is a strong contender, and of course he wouldn't want the zoning to make him ineligible. So you're right. But the central issue here is that the other governors from the north didn't want the chairman strong, and Saraki can take it, but more importantly, Governor Tom also was willing to take it. And from a chief ethnic politics, it was good to have Benue, or kind of, they want to also, and Benue has been controlling the party. How come? Solomon La, Plateau Benue, and of course, Amadou Ali could get away. But Benue has played a key role in holding the party. And so that's like a mixture of real politics. We don't want it in our backyard. And strategic concentration. Maybe we need to have the chairman. It also help us to kind of get ourselves into the big picture. But ultimately, the key players, Atiku Abubakar, Tambuwa, Governor of Bauchi, former Minister of FCT, they didn't want this chairmanship to be given to them. Not only chairman, it affected secretary in Southeast, by the way. You see that most of the governors say, don't give us. Either says, I don't want. Or say, I don't want. And ultimately, for what I'm hearing, Imo got it as part of the weaker politics and the governor of the politics. So this is a triumph of who has a post, who has a muscle, and the governors always determine who gets what in PDP. I would say
very interesting submission you've got there. And I come back to you, Mahmoud. The influence of the governors, of course, is still showed all through this discussion. And as we head towards the national convention of the party, I want you to analyze what it means when you have an Iyorchia Ayu having an exclusive interview with Arise News. And twice I heard him saying that if a presidential candidate emerges from his zone, that he will be willing to step down. Is this a kind of northern politics that is being played on the generality of party members in that major opposition party, saying that, look, we are actually still going for the presidency, and so we are only just asking Iyorchia to hold forth while we go for the ultimate prize, and when we get it, we'll ask him to step down for a candidate from the southern part of the country?
Well, since they are politicians, I expect them to play complicated games like that. The game of trying to win power is not a joke. And really, if you are a dedicated party man or an active politician within a political party, like if you are a dedicated PDP member, the number one goal is to win back power. That is the most important thing.
Irrespective of where the presidential candidate comes from?
Exactly, because that is the only way that party leaders and members will be able to realize their individual ambitions to become ministers and heads of agencies and ambassadors, and whether it's contracts or any other thing. So that is the number one priority. Everything, it is people who are outside the political parties that could be very sentimental about it should be zoned to this. But a party will not do a zoning arrangement that could apparently lead to failure in the election.
Because the ultimate aim of a party is to win elections.
That's the most important. That's why the parties are there.
Very interesting indeed.
Yeah.
Okay, and I'll come to you, Prof. Adeni. Thabo Mbeki, former South African president, was speaking about the issues of conflict challenges in Africa during the week while addressing the UN. Says the major issue that leads to conflict in many African countries, especially the big African countries like Nigeria, Ethiopia, and all of that, is the lack of proper management of diversity. And he mentioned that in Nigeria, our failure to manage our diversity is leading to the challenges we're having with separatist movements in the southeast. And he mentioned Ethiopia. The ongoing war between that country and the Tigray region is because of the lack of proper management of the country's diversity and on and on. How do we ensure that this power rotation doesn't become a huge national challenge that could lead us to a major conflict in 2023?
Well, first of all, I think Thabo Mbeki is just, with greatest respect to him, I won't say he's stating the obvious, but he's probably just telling us what we already know, that, our challenge has been, our ability to manage our differences, we are...
And don't forget he lived in Nigeria in the
Absolutely,
70s,
yeah.
so he understands the power dynamics.
Yeah, that's right. We're a disaggregated country, we are heterogeneous, but what matters really is how we manage, how we're able to homogenize this heterogeneity. We're not, being heterogeneous does not make us different from other society where we have emphatic differences across the world. And that's what we've been talking about, the question of leadership. At what point in our evolution are we going to have leaders that will rise above cleavages, that will rise above our fault lines, that will not remind us of our differences, that we all collectively see as a national hero? We have been close to this in the past, no doubt. You were close to it in the period with Muritala Mohammed, I dare say. We're also close to it with the near emergence of Moshood Abiola as president of Nigeria. And Obasanjo, to some extent, was close to it, but there's something always come, and deny us of this opportunity, so that we'll have somebody who, once you mention his name, you will not remember his region, his tribe, you just see him, as a Nigerian leader. True and true. But again, we have seen instances of these at the subnational level, at agency levels. And I think at some point in time in the future, we may come to see this kind of leader, who will bring us together, and will not remind us of our differences, and we'll just see ourselves as one entity. It's a phase that we are going through, and there's no nation in the world that has not gone through this experience. Italy, for instance, was a completely divided country at some point. What about France? France was divided ahead of the French Revolution, and it took deliberate effort, painstaking efforts to bring about unity. How much of that have we done? What is our national language beyond the English language? Beyond this symbol, there are some symbols that identify us as one. How much have we played up these things to emphasize our oneness, our Nigerianness? Well, these are things that we need to be concerned about.
Very interesting indeed. And Prof. Sam, as we go into 2023, I want you to take a look at how these political parties, especially the major parties, could serve as a vehicle for peace or conflict. Considering what Thabo Mbeki has said, that it's our lack of our improper management of the country's diversity that has led to these agitations, that has led to this, conflict here and there. As we head to 2023, if the PDP produces a northern presidential candidate, for example, and the APC produces a southern presidential candidate, for example, don't you think that's a recipe for a chaos that may emerge if the rhetoric that goes on within the political campaigns is not properly managed?
Well, it depends on how it's managed, like you said. In politics, the first principle is don't win the argument and lose the votes. But if you want to be sustainable, you don't win the votes and lose the argument. So what that means is that if the parties are rhetorical, they have to, if they decide that it's better for us to go north or go south, what matters in this contention is reason, what you call communicative strategy. You have to say, explain to the people, you have to create a sense of trust. But this is not a question of marginalizing or the language of Sabra Ratcliffe. Oh, we have the numbers. No, that's an argument that kind of defeats democracy, which is actually a government that tries to protect minorities. Democracy is a strategy. Liberal democracy, or what we call competitive democracy, is a process of protecting strategic interests, including the human rights of minorities. So if the Nigerian politicians rise to the game and make a choice based on functionality, but undergive that choice with a strategic communication that shows that they acknowledge and recognize the importance of justice for everybody, but that this Nigerian president is a president that will create inclusion. And how do you go about it? I've always argued that probably at this stage of our development, we need a presidency that's shared presidency, meaning the presidency that is not an imperial president, where people think that if you lose the presidential game, you've lost everything. For example, Abacha had a wonderful constitution, unfortunately, which Nikki Tobi threw away. In Abacha's constitution, the idea was in 20 years' time, all the zones would have had presidents. And the point about the nation is not just about momentary efficiency, it's about sustainable goodwill. So countries that have been stable have tried to share power if they are ethnic, multi-religious like us, deep diversity. So you share power, you share positions, you rotate them in a way to build a common commitment to the core of the nation. So the winner takes all politics will undermine trust and national unity.
Just hold on there, and I want to get Mahmoud's contribution on this. If the North loses the presidential ticket in the PDP, in 1 minute, do you foresee them still going ahead to support a Southern presidential candidate in the PDP?
Honestly, personally, I don't believe, in the politics of zoning. Although it is the same underlying principle with federal character and all that. You do these things, they are not ideal, but you have to do them in order to create a sense of belonging
Fairness
and to establish peace in the polity. Yes, because it's very important, because if you don't have peace in the polity, nothing else will work. But the only thing is that even the two major parties have to be looking over their shoulder as they are doing this zoning, because we have more than 40 political parties. So, you can't just do things entirely based on sentiment. You have to evaluate the entire situation, because otherwise, as Professor Sam said, you can win the argument and lose the votes.
Very interesting indeed. So we have to go on a short break now. When we return, we shall be discussing the Senate's amendment to the Electoral Act to permit direct primaries for all political parties. It's still part of the national conversation. Do stay with us. This week, where we'll have the best of analysis and conversations. I'm Sumner Sambo. Now, the Senate has approved direct primaries for the conduct of internal elections in all political parties in the country. The amendments were made to some clauses of the Electoral Act earlier passed on July 15, 2021. The upper chamber explains that the decision to subject the amended clauses of the bill to what's called recommittal in legislative language was reached after critical examination by the Senate Committee on Independent National Electoral Commission. But the opposition People's Democratic Party has kicked against the Senate's approval of direct primaries for the nomination of candidates for elections. The party says the decision by the APC-controlled Senate is a blow to democratic norms and a plot to introduce anarchy during internal party elections as currently obtainable in the APC, as the process is very expensive. And we still have with us here a board of Arise News analysts who are helping us to understand these critical national issues. I have Mahmoud Jega, who's a Arise News analyst, right here in the studio with us, and then Professor Abiodun Adeniyi, who's also a Arise News analyst here with us, and joining us virtually is Professor Sam Mamadi. So I come to you, Professor Adeniyi. When you hear the PDP opposing this and insisting that the best way out should actually be for the Senate or National Assembly to leave it open for both parties to adopt either direct or indirect primaries as was previously being done. What do you make of that? They say that it's too expensive to run direct primaries, as we've seen the All Progressives Congress doing, but the APC used this overwhelming majority in the Senate to actually push through that legislation. What's your view?
Yeah, but to be honest, I'm not sure I've had enough explanation from the Senate, but I want to believe that there must have been reasons why they took that decision, maybe probably to reduce corruption in the direct, that the direct primary is usually fraught with, and to make it much more transparent.
Well, from what they said, I was on the floor that day, the idea is you give back power to party members.
Absolutely.
That a lot of bigwigs, money bags in the political parties just gather people in a stadium or in a particular environment and just decide to use money to influence the outcome. But this time around, they want party members to have a say, like it's usually done in the United States for the election of, most political leaders.
That's right. And
so
that's what I was trying to say, that maybe
to campaign.
It's an attempt to make the process, the internal democratic process, much more grassroots oriented, much more, they want to get the people much more integrated. We saw it happen in the APC primaries in Lagos, and before you knew it, results were quick to come out, there were no delays. And so sometimes direct primaries or indirect primaries has a way, there's a way in which money banks hijack it, and of course the will of the people are probably largely subverted in the process, But there's going to be a question of back and forth, because the counter argument is that, it's an independent thing, it should be an individual thing, something that should be peculiar or unique for the parties to decide, it should be left to the parties to decide, not for the Senate to intervene. But overall, the Senate decision is not final. We're still expecting some concurrence from the House of Representatives,
House of Reps, yes.
Ahead of presidential accent. So,
yeah.
I think
so I come to you. I come to you, Prof. Sam. When you see the PDP defending the indirect primaries that they've always used over time, what comes to your mind? Because I could see Senate Minority Leader Ayinaya Abaribe standing up, trying to muzzle his weight, but unfortunately, PDP didn't have the majority to see that legislation through. And the APC is saying, through its overwhelming majority in the Senate, that look, they've tried indirect primaries since 2014 when they became a party, and it seems to be working. But others are saying that the target is actually governors who don't make legislators feel comfortable because they just want to nominate everyone, and so they want to whittle down the powers of governors. What's your take?
Well, I think like Nigeria, we make our laws based on temporal exigencies and challenges. We don't think it through. On a popular sense, it makes sense to say direct democracy. So we're going back to anthers. The party members elect their their leaders or their officials. But that is a problem. The idea that governors can be whittled, their power can be whittled down through basic electoral reform may not work, because I went to run for primaries. At the end of the day, he who has the resources will probably buy the delegates. For example, somebody will fill the form. They'll tell that, okay, all members should validate their membership card at the price of 10,000 naira. So what happens is that these patrons who are going to run election will collect 500 delegates members card and pay for them. And those members, in fact, it will be a hardware. Who would they support? So I think, again, should the National Assembly legislate electoral mode of internal party politics? I think it's wrong because, you see, we are doing a lot of transplants, legislative, legal transplant, extra transplant that are not autonomously evolving. I think INEC probably will focus, a lot of paperwork has to be done. You have to have registered members, for example, have their list before you can talk about efficient,
We seem to be having a challenge there with his connection, but I'll come to you, Mahmoud. I mean, I remember during the PDP's national convention ahead of the 2019 general election, one national newspaper actually used this headline, "Dollars flow in Port Harcourt," during the PDP national convention, and they actually mentioned a particular candidate going around and pumping dollars. Now, if you look at what the federal lawmakers are trying to do, isn't it to strengthen the capacity of party members to reason and say, look, if I'm going to stand and elect this person to represent my party, it means that I shouldn't get any inducement, and then it returns that power back to those party members, so that anyone who comes wouldn't be judged based on the amount of dollars or naira that he or she has in possession.
That is just a forlorn hope. I agree entirely with my two colleagues that ideally the Senate should not dictate to the political parties, because okay, there are some advantages maybe to the direct primaries, as you said, to empower party members. But the truth is that there are also very good arguments in favor of indirect primaries. Representative democracy is legitimate. Representatives can act on behalf, especially when you have millions of people involved. They can indirectly elect delegates who will go. The same power that hijacks indirect primaries, yes, all this, as you said, dollar flowing. The same thing will happen even in indirect primaries.
But when you have it going around several wards, if, for example, you have 183 wards in a state, where will that person who is contesting for the position of governorship in the party primaries have those monies that would flow through the 183 wards, for example? Wouldn't it become much more difficult?
It will still be done because it's relative. It's relative. You see, if you have only maybe 1 or 2 naira to give to each delegate, somebody has 10, then that gives him an advantage. Governors will be able, if the whole purpose, as we have had, was for the legislators, because they fear that the governors will hijack the party primaries at various stages and determine who will win tickets for Senate and House and all that. Even if you do direct primaries, the same thing will happen, because the person who has the capacity to hijack delegates can also hijack the direct primaries. In fact, more so, because the direct primaries go all the way to the wards and the villages.
Very interesting submission you've got indeed. So, well, we just have to move on to other issues now. Nigeria's military has announced the death of Abu Musab Al-Barnawi, the head of the West African branch of the Islamic State group. Chief of Defense Staff General Lucky Rabo says he can authoritatively confirm that the terrorist leader is dead, although he did not give details of how the ISWAP leader was killed. Under Al-Barnawi, ISWAP became the dominant jihadist force in Nigeria, striking frequently at troops in an insurgency that has killed more than 40,000 persons since 2009. The Islamic State West Africa province has not commented on the claims. Recently, no fewer than 13,243 terrorists, their families and collaborators surrendered to troops, while over 74 others still fighting have been killed by the military, and analysts say the current scenario gives credence to the statement by the defense headquarters. Let's listen.
I can authoritatively confirm to you that Al-Barnawi is dead. As simple as that. He's dead and remains dead.
All right, I come to you, Professor Adeniyi. Al-Barnawi is dead, and he's dead for real. Considering that this is the son of later Muhammad Yusuf, the founder of Boko Haram, and who went ahead to form the splinter group after the death of his father, and it eventually was competing for space within the Northeast alongside Boko Haram. What do you think that the death of Al-Barnawi, as said by the Nigerian military, will mean to the war against insurgency in that part of the country?
Quite a lot, really. But first, I'm intrigued by the comment of the Chief of Defense Staff that he's dead. And not just dead, but he remains dead, which means that he cannot. He cannot rise again.
Just hope he doesn't surface somewhere like we used to have in the past.
Absolutely, not like the case when we had check out the first, check out the third, the second, and probably check out the third. But this one, he has assured us, is dead and it's not going to rise again. So good riddance to bad rubbish. It's a welcome development, no doubt. It doesn't matter how he died. The important thing is that he's been taken away, and ordinarily you will not want the death of the other of a fellow human being, but we're in a war situation, and of course we want to take out the enemy. So it should be a motivation, a morale booster, for our forces, an encouragement that if they continue what they are doing, of course, eventually we're going to sing hallelujah.
And to you, Professor Sam, are we beginning to see the end of the war against insurgency in Nigeria under a Buhari presidency?
Well, we can. It all depends on how the president conducts the war strategy. But the most important thing is, you don't just say he is dead and that's all. You have to give details, some detail. You don't have to tell us everything. And this is important because a war against a terror is an asymmetrical war. So information is critical. And harnessing public support is important. So like the US, when even somebody as dangerous as Osama bin Laden was killed, we had stories how he was killed. We may not get all the details, but some sense in which communication becomes credible. But again, on the bigger issue, whether the death is a big deal, yes, to an extent, but don't forget that even in the bigger war against Al-Qaeda, several times the US take out leading leaders of these terror movements, but somebody takes over. And what matters is their capacity on ground. And what matters is both the kinetic efforts and the war of mind. And of course, the alignment of politicians and local actors and community assurance and trust, social capital. The communities themselves help the forces to properly route out the terrorists. But again, this government has struggled for the past 6 years to really push back. In recent times, we've seen some significant success with air raids and killings and maybe taking the initiative. But we can't say they will ultimately to finish the work in 2 years. It depends. We've changed service chiefs, and it looks like the system is working better.
Right, we'll have to go on the break right now, Professor Sam. And when we come back, Mahmoud Jega will be helping us to understand if indeed Al-Barnawi was killed by the Nigerian military or Boko Haram or any other faction of all these terrorist groups. So stay with us as we go on this short break. Welcome back to This Week, where we hold the best of conversations and analysis. I'm Sumner Sambo, and we're still continuing our conversation on the death of ISWAP leader Al-Barnawi. And I'm coming to you now, Mahmoud. Do we believe our military actually killed Al-Barnawi, or we should think that this was a help done to the country by these splinter groups that had previously been fighting against each other? Because ISWAP was having a stronger hand against Boko Haram after the death of Shekau, and later on we heard that Boko Haram was regrouping and becoming strong. Who should we believe in all of this rhetoric?
Well, the truth was that at least 2 or 3 weeks before the Chief of Defense Staff made this statement, Daily Trust newspaper reported the death of Al-Barnawi, quoting credible intelligence sources in Borno. And since then, the group didn't deny it. Well, the group also didn't confirm it, but they didn't deny it, and it does look like that was the case. Now, as to the effect, you see, if what happened to Shekau's Boko Haram faction after his death is any indicator, and I think it is, the death of Al-Barnawi is likely to disorganize and demoralize his faction of ISWAP, because insurgent groups and terrorist groups need charismatic leadership. Just like we saw after the death of Shekau, his group is now highly disorganized. They are surrendering in droves, in thousands, according to the military. And we can see also
and why is it very difficult for the Nigerian military to actually let citizens know that they eliminated Al-Barnawi, and Nigerians should continue to trust the military to decimate all other terrorist groups in the country?
I agree with you that the Chief of Defense Staff should have been more forthcoming, especially given that in the past, such claims made by the military proved to be inaccurate. So this time, the Chief of Defense Staff should not just say, we should take his word for it.
Yeah, because he sounded passive.
Yeah,
and not
he's dead and he remains dead. I mean, you should tell us.
Maybe we want to look at it from the other way around again. Maybe there is being more circumspect, just in case it is found out later that it's not, he didn't die because Nigerian killed him. So they want to be more careful, unlike what the situation was in the past. Especially
sometimes when you see these foreign news agencies bringing some stories, and then you now hear that it was the Chadian troops that did it,
right.
or, you know, and it becomes very funny. Well, we have to move on to other stories. The federal government has set a December 1 deadline for civil servants to be vaccinated. Chairman of the Presidential Steering Committee on COVID-19 and Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Boss Mustafa, made the disclosure in Abuja. The federal government says it will bar civil servants without proof of COVID-19 vaccination from their offices starting from the said date. The Boss Mustafa-led Presidential Steering Committee on COVID-19 had announced that the directive will be applicable in all locations in Nigeria and missions abroad, adding that a circular will be issued to that effect. There have been general reluctance by Nigerians to get vaccinated, and the federal government seems ready to enforce the vaccination to curb the spread of the pandemic and achieve what it called herd immunity. And I will go to you, Professor Sam Amadi. Take us through this. How successful, I mean, you have worked in government before. How do you think the government will be able to implement this, considering that, I mean, a huge chunk of Nigerians still don't want to get vaccinated, and they just don't want to believe that COVID-19 still exists?
I mean, vaccination is important as a strategy to contain the spread of the virus, and of course, deal with the adverse side of hospitalization and death. But again, as a public policy initiative, it's not well thought out. First, if you look at our vaccination rates, I mean, maybe 0.0 something. If you look at supply available to us, so we're not even close to 40%, 30%. That gives you, you know, say, if I mandate vaccine, then the cost benefit of mandate would drive up vaccination rates to significant level where you attain herd immunity and then begin to force down on infection rates and, of course, death rate. Again, if you look at the numbers we are having officially on death rate, they are not that large. So a policy that creates hardship, that violates, arguably, rights. In the US, the debate has been around the right of people to make their choice. So if a policy violates that right and it doesn't serve too much public good, then it's doubtful if it's a good policy. A policy should have cost benefits. So if you're going to invade people's right to choose and say, look, you have to forcefully vaccinate, then you have to look at what is the socioeconomic value, public health value. This is very low in terms of the value that you get because of the fact that our vaccination rate is very low, and even the number of civil servants in the civil service, if they all vaccinate and the public is not vaccinating much, as we see, you still may not have that benefit of head immunity. So if I was to advise, from a public policy point of view, it's a low-level public policy. I won't.
Interesting submission you've got here. And Prof. Adeni, I just want you to take us through how feasible this would be, considering that a lot of people will say that it's against their religious rights to get vaccinated, and they don't believe in all of this.
It's going to be very complicated because of the kind of society we are in, you know, cultural differences, religious fundamentalism, and of course conspiracy theories, even in some circles, even amongst religious leaders. You know, and you'll be shocked to see people resigning on account of being forced, being compelled to
resigning under this current weather of unemployment.
We just when people are die-hearted about a situation where they are indoctrinated in the religious light, they can go any extent, you know. But I think government decision, government policy initiative is right. Really, it's actually 6 months late, in my opinion. Okay. You know, from the time the vaccines were rolled out, we should have been concerned about compulsory vaccination. But the problem is just the supply of the materials. Do we have enough to go around? Do we have enough to to go around, not just among the public servants, but the Nigerian citizens in general as well?
Very interesting submission.
But herd immunity is important in the circumstance because COVID-19 has come to stay. It's not going to go away, you know. But if we're not fully prepared, of course, we know the danger it can cause.
Very
in terms of
submission you've got there. And Mahmoud, I come to you. Enforcement. I mean, you during the thick of the COVID-19, you could see how difficult it was for law enforcement agencies to enforce, you know, regulations and all of that. And I'm just wondering, how would the federal government enforce this regulation, considering that it has almost maybe about 200,000 to 300,000 federal civil servants across the country?
Probably, I mean, if you include security agencies, probably 1 million. But you know, I fully support the policy to start with. You should begin with the sectors that you can control. The general population is more difficult to control, but civil servants, and you can make a good case and say, look, you are sitting in a public office, you should not, by refusing to take vaccination, endanger colleagues at work and also members of the public that come to you as a public officer. You have no right to endanger them. So the government is saying that everybody must show proof of full vaccination by 1st December.
And my general concern is if people will not go and fake vaccination cards. Very quickly, 30 seconds. What's your view, Mahmoud? Very quickly, as you try to round off the program.
People are already doing that with respect to traveling. People are already doing that. They are fake. When you go asking for vaccines, they will say, are you traveling? And then they will give you one. But then if you are not careful, the foreigners there will catch you.
Okay. Professor Sam, yes. What's your view on that? Don't you think there will be an increase in fake vaccine cards in less than 1 minute?
The unintended consequence, fake certificate, even in the developed economies, people are faking vaccine certificates. So we don't have the capacity to track most of this. So you're going to see a black market of vaccine certification without the actual vaccine. So we need to be careful in copying policies that its gain will be less than the resources and the dislocations, you know, and the conflict to generate. I don't think it's a very well thought out policy.
Okay, Professor Adeni, your view on that?
The policy direction is out. You know, if it is well implemented, of course, we know it's going to be good for us, you know. But the problem we always have is not just the law or the regulation, but implementation. Is the execution going to be something?
We'll just see how the federal government will enforce that.
They have to be ready.
It's been good, speaking with you, gentlemen. We've had a board of Arise News analysts helping us to go through national issues ranging from the issue of rotational presidency, party politics, Al-Barnawi's killing, and this compulsory vaccination. And I must thank you, Professor Sam Amadi, who is joining us virtually to take a critical look at this analysis, and then Professor Abiodun Adeni, and of course Mahmoud Jega, who are all Arise News analysts. And that's how it's been for this edition of This Week from me and the entire team here in Abuja. Goodbye and thank you for watching. I'm Somna Sambu.